Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Real quick message here in the beginning. We had unfortunate audio issues in our recording session with Rob, but I was able to repair it good enough that we felt comfortable releasing it. However, it's not the best. So much so that I ended up canceling Zoom and we're now recording in Teams and we have some other backup methods. But nonetheless, I apologize for the audio issues, but it was such a great interview with such great information that I still wanted to release it. So please forgive us. And in the future, it should be much, much better. Thank you once again for listening and watching. Hello, everyone. Ryan with the Metrology podcast. I'm joined with Henry, my co-host.
Hello.
And we're also joined with Rob from
Roberto.
NIST. Roberto. Now, we've also had other people that have worked at NIST before on the program, Rob. I don't know if you've caught those episodes, but no one that's currently at NIST. So we really appreciate you coming on the show.
And Rob is under legal disclaimer to not say anything.
Yes, we have to be careful on our subjects. So we will respect those rules. We won't try and catch Rob at saying anything too fanatic, right?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that. I do like working here, and
we want to keep that going. Well, Rob, we have a very natural lead in most of the time, especially since it's the first time on the show. Do you mind telling us how you got into metrology? Everybody has a very different path to get to where they're at this moment. Do you mind sharing with us your journey?
Yeah, sure. So, like most of us, I didn't go to college or school intending to be a metrologist. Maybe I knew a little bit about what calibration was. I probably have heard that a few times. But I ended up going to an engineering school in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Michigan Technological University. Really good engineering school. But I started off in chemical engineering. Didn't care for that so much. So I switched to industrial management and have been associates in chemical engineering technology. But through that industrial management degree, I actually started taking some classes on like ISO 9001 and quality management systems and basically quality principles associated with running a laboratory or some sort of industrial facility for manufacturing. And so I got exposed to some of the concepts of metrology there. But it wasn't until I graduated college. I ended up in Maryland. My girlfriend in college, my now wife, graduated a semester before I did. Moved out here, ended up working at NIST as a guest researcher there. And I followed her out here. And then basically through that connection and where she was working, she actually worked for an organization called ASHTO. They had an accreditation program, actually, very focused on the construction materials testing laboratories. So if you wanted to do work for the state or federal highways, you had to have their accreditation for the tests that you were going to do associated with like roads and bridges and any of that type of construction.
Okay.
I moved out here, and we were both broke college kids. So at first, I had a couple jobs, just like doing whatever we could do to pay the bills. But when I actually started looking for the career, she found this job with actually it was A2LA. So I worked with them, and she said, "Hey, the calibration program is hiring." I was like, "Well, I don't know anything about calibration." She's like, "Well, I don't think many people do, So she's like, "But you have the right background, right?" So I applied, and Dana Lehman actually was the one who was responsible for interviewing me, and she hired me at A2LA. And I worked there at A2LA in the Cal program for a number of years, and then through that, I got involved in things like NCSLI. I got involved with some other testing programs, PT providers, reference material producers, but I always had at least a toe in the metrology and calibration world. And eventually, I decided to move on from A2LA. Went to JLG Industries and was managing their global compliance. So they build those boom lifts and things that you probably see at construction sites all over.
Right.
The orange, JLG lifts.
Very marketable product.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Branded very well.
Yes, billions of dollars of business all over the globe. And then I was helping them with some of their calibration stuff. They do a lot of internal calibrations on like hand tools, torque wrenches, things like that.
Sure. Of course.
So that was part kind of just I was because I had the background and was assisting with some of that. But then someone at NavLab, which NavLab is the accreditation body that's part of NIST. So we're the National Voluntary Laboratory Accreditation Program. We're one of the ILAC recognized MRA accreditation bodies in the U.S. I'm sure we'll chat about that a bit later.
We'll talk about that. Yep.
But one of the folks who was a Cal program manager there decided to retire a little bit earlier than maybe was originally anticipated, and I was able to kind of hear about this. And I wasn't looking to change roles. I wasn't necessarily looking to get back to the accreditation world as quickly, but being able to work at NIST and just kind of step back into the accreditation world and just hit the ground running. And also, I mentioned Dana Lehman hired me at A2LA. Well, she's the chief at NavLab now. And so, I like to joke around and say she's now screwed up and hired me twice because she hired me back at NavLab. And so now here it is, 17 years later, I guess. And, I've been involved with all sorts of organizations related to metrology at this point. So that's how I got into there. I kind of just, hey, here's a job posting, and I really enjoyed it. And the community is so great that I just really wanted to get back to it and missed it. Just even that short 1 year period that I was away from it.
Yeah, that's what I see a lot is, we're always trying to cultivate that next, they do the quote unquote next generation of metrologists, right? But it's, you mentioned you kept a toe in metrology. Sometimes all it takes is the metrology trap to get you, right? But once you get that bug, it's like, it's something we all become very passionate about. I've noticed that.
Yeah, you get some passion, and then you get frustration, and then and then you go somewhere else and you realize that your true passion, I think that's what happened with Rob, right? When we talked, that your true passion really going somewhere else to JLG made you realize that what you're doing at NavLab is your true passion. And Rob left out a bunch of stuff like president of NCSLI, the famous heir to Kanaki corn. You left that out. If anybody's out there that has had Kanaki corn,
if you're near Coleman, Michigan, make sure you stop by the Kanaki. This is not a NIST or NavLab, advertisement or anything. This is a Rob Kanaki personal family corn advertisement.
Awesome.
No, but that's your grandfather that he's done corn for years, and it's always we always joke with Rob on the corn empire. So it's not an empire. Yeah. It's a roadside stand that apparently has really good corn. So
yeah. Thanks for the plug, Henry.
For the 3 people that might go visit.
Yeah. I somehow doubt many of my relatives or people I grew up back home would probably listen to this podcast on metrology. But maybe you never know.
Go ahead, Henry.
Okay, I was gonna ask to talk about the ILAC, because we kind of blew over that really quickly on like the ILAC MRA. Maybe the listeners, I do not think we've had anybody on to fully explain how ILAC and how the MRA works and how all the accreditation bodies kind of work under this mutual MRA. So I think you would be the best person to explain that, Rob.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So ILAC is the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation. And basically, that's the global overarching organization that provides recognition for accreditation bodies located across the world. So I expect most of your listeners are familiar with accreditation, ISO 17025. They got to get accredited by an accreditation body. You can kind of think of like the ILAC recognition like accreditation of an accreditation body.
Wow.
The difference there is that our standard that we are evaluated against is ISO 17011. So 17025 is for labs, 17011 is for accreditation body, has the same general structure and principles, quality management system, items and requirements, competency requirements, impartiality requirements. So just basically, you have to be competent to be a lab and impartial and have a quality management system. the same principles apply to the accreditation body. It's just focused on what we do instead of the laboratory operations, right? So ILAC is the global overarching structure. There are then regions, regional cooperations that are set up to. The idea is that each region is better situated to come up with specific policies, procedures, and processes that will address the accreditation bodies in kind of that economic region, right? And then those regions are evaluated by ILAC to make sure that they're set up to then do these peer evaluations, which provide the recognition of the accreditation body. So laboratories get assessed, accreditation bodies get peer evaluated, is what it's called. But the principles are the same. We're essentially being assessed to the requirements of 17011 and then specific policies and procedures that are part of ILAC recognition. Our evaluations happen once every 4 years. For example, NAVLAP just had ours in 2024. We have 2 accreditation schemes at NAVLAP, so we only do testing and calibration. Many accreditation bodies will do things like PT provider accreditation, reference field producers, inspection bodies, and all these different accreditation schemes. But they set up the peer evaluation team to go through the quality management system and then cover all those scopes. So kind of like if you had an assessment and you have different disciplines, you've got mechanical, you've got electrical, you've got dimensional, you'll have assessors to cover all of that. We have evaluators that cover all those different like technical areas of accreditation that we offer. And then you get a report, you address any nonconformities, it goes to a review panel, and then it gets reviewed, assuming everything's okay. They say, all right, yep, you can be recognized. And then you're part of that region, and then the region then feeds up into that to ILAC. So NAVLAP, we're part of the IAAC region, the Inter-America Accreditation Cooperation, and APAC, the Asia Pacific Accreditation Cooperation. You don't have to be in 2. Most ABs are in 1. The reason NAVLAP is in 2 is we felt that we have stakeholders. We have conformity assessment bodies in the IAC and the APAC region. So we felt it made sense to be part of both of those. So when we get evaluated, we've got evaluators from APAC and IAC. So we kind of make it almost a little harder on ourselves with doing that. But we felt it's a benefit and that it makes sense. So it's really this ILAC is the overarching process or organization that helps facilitate the recognition and mutual implementation of the requirements of 1711 to ensure that the ABs that are part of this are all equivalent, competent, recognize each other's accreditation as equivalent. So you can try to eliminate any of those barriers to trade where you're like working in Europe and they're like, well, I don't want to accept your CAL results because you weren't, accredited by UCAS in the UK or Accreditia in Italy. So now they say, okay, well, we'll recognize those as equivalent. So ideally, you're not having to have it recaled when you send it out of the country and stuff like that. So that's kind of the grand goal of it all.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, yes. It doesn't always work that way, but that's right, because you do have. I mean, let's a little bit. UCAS LAB 48 was one of my favorite documents, and that's not really. So if you can go into a little bit on that. So UCAS puts out one of their guidance documents. A2LA puts out some of theirs. They don't really. They might not agree with one another, but they're each recognized as and anybody that I encourage anybody to read the UCAS has a great amount of documents. And the ABs are a little different on who's putting what out and the guidance and everything else. That's internal. I guess that's how you run your own company. But yeah, that's so UCAS might lean a little more towards what they're thinking the definitions are and everything else than another organization. But the ILAC has to come in and say, okay, you're all doing the same, right? You're all doing the same thing. You're following the right management procedures and everything else. It's just their interpretation. So can you talk a little, lean a little bit into the interpretations of standards and how that works?
Sure. So much like the accredited laboratories, accredited to 17025, the standard sets a minimum, right?
Right.
and it's very general in the sense of like these are the requirements you have to meet. How you exactly meet those, you could go about it a bunch of different ways, right? So just like you have some variation in the laboratories that are accredited as far as how they meet the requirements and how they go about their specific CALs and tests, even for that matter, you're going to see that with the accreditation bodies as well. Now, what ILAC's not trying to do, they don't want to be too restrictive because each economy is going to have their own regulators, their own specifiers within those economies and stakeholders that are going to have specific needs, right? So they want to be able to be flexible enough to say, okay, as long as we can agree that everybody has met the, let's say, the baseline requirements of the standard for recognition and the procedures that ILAC has, then they couldn't, let's say, go above and beyond, right? They can create additional requirements if that economy has decided that or the regulators have decided that that's needed for things like, let's say, public safety, or like here we have FDA, we've got the EPA that are putting additional things on top of the standard because they feel that's required for like public safety for our drinking water or for the food we eat, et cetera. So, I try to relate it back to how you see the variation even on how labs will implement their processes to meet the requirements. It's the same for ABs, but Henry, you're right. UCAS has some great documents. Lab 48 you mentioned is and they're all freely available. Yeah, they're freely available.
M3003 because NIST
that's very popular with our
NIST did what 12 NIST did 1297 back, and I could beat Rob up on this one. 1297 back in the 90s, and it would be so nice if they'd have the resources to redo things like UCAS did, because 1297 took the gum and made it really approachable, like measurement uncertainty and what you need to do, though it hasn't kept up. Like, because right now the gum recommends, like, considering degrees of, Satterthwaite equation, some of the other stuff that's in there. And none of that's in what was done in the 90s. And UCAS took M3003, and they've kind of simplified a lot of JCGM. So
Right. Yeah,
I would love if NIST did it again. That would be my thing, because 1297 is just such an easy read. Oh, this is what you're doing. Where the gum, when you first step into it, it's like, what's this now? Because it's all over. If you're new, it's all over.
Is this Latin? Is there Latin in here?
Yeah. Or Greek. It seems we're deriving things from Greek, like ISO, because that came from ISOs and stuff. So
yeah. ISO
well, and it's younger and younger technicians that are needing to know some of that information, and exposing them to the gum early is good, but at the same time, it doesn't help in that early learning process, right? So some of those other documents are very advantageous for those situations where it's like, hey, what's something that someone can read, just, normal, almost conversational, right?
Well, Rob was on some of those groups. And I mean, you're with like top scientists from NMIs, and we were talking about this a little bit.
I was looking at your LinkedIn. It was incredible.
Top scientists from researchers from various NMIs in these groups, right, trying to write a document for everybody to understand, where it ends up being so high level that only a low percentage of the population actually gets it. And I could see how they, when they're in this group, think everybody in the world gets it, because they're all probably, and you can shed some light on this, they're all probably pretty like-minded with education, right? Just top of their field, like super smart, and it's very difficult to try to convey how to do that to somebody that's just starting out.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm making some general terms or very broad terms, but generally when the National Metrology Institutes get together, they're talking at the NMI level, right? You're talking about the key comparison database and the BIPM, CIPM, MRA, where they're doing their intercomparisons to establish traceability for the key measurements in their economies, right? So it is at the high level, and the very complicated, complex statistics associated with that, because they have to have those uncertainties be so tight, right? They have to try to consider every potential influence they can when they're looking at this. I know that, for most national metrology institutes, the intent is to to not only be the holders of the SI, right, for their economies, but to disseminate that to industry, right? And there's always more work that can be done, could be done, should be done as far as being able to provide educational resources and ways to disseminate this throughout. And I know, the National Metrology Institutes are always struggling, like I think you were saying, Henry, earlier, with you have so much amount of funding and you've got all these things that you're trying to do. And so, your area, you have to be strategic in where you're focusing those. And is it the research level? Is it the, maintenance of the SI? Is it doing calibrations to support industry, or developing these educational things? The answer is it should be all of it, right? And just trying to meet the most critical needs with the resources we have. It's the same, not unlike problems that any business or would have as well, right? But yeah.
Before we move too far off of this, when you're having these NMI meetings, I'm trying to envision, just because right now there's so much evolving technology, right? And measurement fields that keep popping up, new ones or ones that are cutting edge, IR and or black body and stuff like that, So is there like just an announcement, or do you guys have regular meetings where you talk about, hey, we need to start producing this standard, we need to change this standard? Like, how does that stuff work? Who oversees all of that stuff?
So, well, I guess at the international level, the answer would be it would go through like the BIPM process of where those meetings are taking place, to have the discussions of, how are we doing as far as dissemination of SI units that are needed across the globe. In each economy, it's going to be the NMI is trying to solicit, or maybe not even having to actively solicit, but they're hearing from industry, hey, we need support in 5G, for example, right? Measurements at these high frequencies, right? Some of just the cutting edge technology. Well, we need to make sure we have traceability for this, and we need NIST help, right, in developing the traceability for this. Electrical vehicles and the charging stations and how to cal those. There's a huge push in that area, right? And NIST is involved in helping develop traceable measurements for calibration of all these charging stations, because that's huge for it's basically like using gasoline pumps, right? There's a legal metrology aspect to that.
You're being paid by the kilowatt hour or something like that, is it?
Right.
I haven't been to one.
Right. Yeah,
it's tough though too, because then you have to think about all the states and all the states' budget to implement everything in this, and there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that information, I guess, feeds up through either your states, or your National Metrology Institute, standards development organizations, so NIST is also heavily involved in standards development organizations. We have a division for that as well. Actually, we do fall under that division. NAVLab falls under the Standards Coordination Office. But so I guess I don't know if it's the most correct answer, but the best answer, I think, as far as globally, is those BIPM meetings where the National Metrology Institutes get together. There are a lot of things discussed there, but one of them is kind of those new areas where we need to be looking at, researching, and developing perhaps key comparisons to supplement the KCDB.
That makes sense. So basically, local economies sometimes will bring, just through feedback loops, will bring your awareness to a measurement need, and then that will sometimes trickle into the BIPM meetings. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And remember too, like every economy is at a different stage in the development of their measurement infrastructure.
Sure.
Right? You've got some of the original signatories that have been involved in metrology since the beginning, let's say, right? And then you have some economies that maybe just established a National Metrology Institute in their economy in the last couple decades, and they might be very focused on something like mass, volume, right? Legal metrology type measurements, like let's say the most common measurements. and their levels of uncertainties and whatnot may be closer to like what we see here at like a primary calibration lab, right? Because they're just that's what they're able to do, but it meets the need in that economy. So you've got
Right.
this huge, I guess spectrum of the National Metrology Institutes and economies that are bringing forward different needs and different, feedback from their economy of what's coming down the pipe, what do we need to be looking at, and what do we need to be trying to establish traceability, metrological traceability with to support global industry, and not just at that national economy level as well. So,
I think, Rob, what was really interesting, and I saw it, I was looking for it, was when you were talking about like the different economies and different NMIs. Well, they have an interview with NIST, and they just talk about, hey, the cost to go to the next decimal place. So a lot of industry, it just depends on what the economy and the industry is, on what you're chasing and where the funds are somewhat going. I think, right? If that's and maybe if you're building roadways and whatnot, you don't need as accurate of measurement as if you're trying to get to Mars.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And some economies make decisions to rely on traceability from another economy rather than develop their own National Metrology Institute, right? Because it's expensive to do that,
super
and
expensive.
you need a lot of knowledge to be able to to support that, right? And so they may just decide, what, we're a small enough economy. We're not going to have a National Metrology Institute. We'll rely on our neighbors, right, to provide that information. But those people still want a seat at the table to be able to be stakeholders and say, hey, by the way, I'm relying on you for these things. So if you're with as a National Metrology Institute, please don't when you're looking at your budgets and where you're putting your resources, don't stop doing this measurement because you're essentially buying National Metrology Institute
Oh yeah.
for that measurement, right? So it's a way that like a direct communication from an economy to a National Metrology Institute, that international level as well, is another way to get like that type of feedback to those folks who are making the type of decisions of, okay, where are we going to focus our resources when it comes to like the type of measurements they're going to do research on or provide and continue to disseminate through industry. So there's a lot of things that people don't think about day to day happening at the NMI level.
Yeah.
And it's important for people to understand how a National Metrology Institute really does impact the infrastructure. Like I said, if you think about, most people are buying something that's been either weighed or measured for volume or for something like that, right? For at the grocery store, at the gas pump, whatever. And they probably don't even think about the fact that those scales have been calibrated or the pumps have been inspected and calibrated, and we see the little sticker on there that says been inspected, and it's good until this time or whatever.
And that sticker might have an old date on it, and people wonder why.
Yep, old date,
what to do.
Or the uncertainty at the pump. Bag on the pump, what that really means, and so it's something that people just don't think about, but does have a big impact on their day to day.
And it requires a lot of resources to keep it all in place. It's not something that's just super easy that magically you just keep holding your measurements. No one ever retires, and the gas pumps always pump the same amount and everything else. There's variation in everything.
Oh, yeah.
No gas pump is going to pump the exact same amount. We know that. Right. It's just how well we measure. Like, are we taking it to 1 decimal, 2, 3, 4? At some point, there's variation if we can even measure.
Yeah. The important thing is that you've defined what that acceptable variation is, and then you've done that inspection, the measurement, to confirm it's operating within that, and then at least everybody can agree that that's acceptable.
Yep.
And generally, I think most of the time, at least from what I understand, like at the gas pump, you're usually, if anything, getting a little bit more than you're paying for because they want to air towards that side. If you're gonna,
that's a lot of industry though, because the fines for being under are so great that you give a little bit away to
The
avoid
baker's dozen rule. That's what I
yeah,
call it.
to avoid those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff
Well, and one thing,
Yeah.
right, we're at this topic, and this kind of just to encompass it, because I don't know if we specifically stated MRA, the mutual recognition agreement. I mean, isn't that, if we're talking to people brand new to the industry, that's kind of the takeaway, is that this is all involved in our trade and commerce every day. And if we don't have these agreements, then when we're shopping even outside your own state, I mean, wouldn't it still, I mean, you have to have, because the whole country isn't covered by one
Right.
entity. So, you know, that MRA comes in big even in our own country's commerce, let alone around the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, the U.S. is an interesting country, right? It's almost like we're one country made up of 50 countries.
Right.
Yeah, you know, the way
Very
Pretty
much so,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, because all the
Right.
and you have
Yeah.
to figure out what state lab does what, because different state labs have different capabilities.
Yeah, so yes, even in the U.S., you know, from state to state, and sometimes even from like county to county or municipality to municipality, they may have their own regulations and whatnot. So being able to for those regulators to say, hey, you know what, if you're accredited by an ILAC MRA signatory, like NAVLab, for example, then we'll accept that, right? We don't have to do our own check on that. We're going to accept that as part of the evaluation of the results we get from you. So expand that to the global level, yeah, and then it's like I was saying, UCAS testing or CAL results, we'd accept those, just like they would accept ours, unless they had some other additional regulation, which that doesn't come up a lot. I will say most of the time, regulators seem to be happy to rely on ILAC accreditation, but I don't know if I should bring it up now. I think we were chatting a little bit before we started about the changes that are coming to ILAC.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Glowback was the big word that we were not going to call it ILAC. It's going to be
Blowback, blowback.
Blowback,
right.
blowback with glowback. Tell us all about the blowback with glowback.
So ILAC, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, and IAF, which is the International Accreditation Forum, are two entities that provide this mutual recognition. ILAC dealt with the laboratory, like what we call the laboratory side of things. So that would be testing labs, calibration, PT providers, reference material producers, inspection bodies. I may be forgetting one, so I apologize if I am. IAF dealt more with the management system registration, like so the ISO 9001 registrars, they're accredited, right? So
yeah,
product certification bodies, personnel certification bodies. There are so many quality management system standards out there that fall under IAF. So those two organizations have always worked hand in hand because there is so much overlap. NAVLAP, we only do 17025 accreditation, but most other economies in the world have one accreditation body. It's governmental, and there's really no competition. So they provide accreditation for all of the schemes, right? So they've got all the management system schemes. They've got all the what we would call the laboratory schemes that fall under ILAC and IF. Well, over the years, the cooperation between IF and ILAC has just gotten more and more and more, to the point where it was decided between the stakeholders and the ILAC and IAF executive committees that they would merge into one organization. And this process of investigating the feasibility of merging and actually implementing the merger has been going on for years, but it's really kicking off, I guess I'll say, in earnest of the actual transition this year, with the target for what is the Global Accreditation Cooperation, or GLOBAC is what it's going to go by, is going to kick off January of next year. So this new organization currently will start to operate, replace ILAC and IAF January of next year. So what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything as far as changes to the the recognition arrangements and agreements that we have across the world. It'll be equivalent. What it will mean is there's going to need to be a lot of education and information coming from this new entity to regulators, stakeholders. Accreditation bodies are really going to have to inform their regulators and stakeholders that, hey, this new or what appears to be a new entity is a merger of really ILAC and IAF, but for all intents and purposes, it's equivalent to that. So when you see this new entity, that's what it is. They're also going to retain the ILAC and IAF rights to the mark and everything, so that there'll be this transition time where I'm sure there'll be some questions coming up. Your customers, like Henry, for example, may have some questions about that. And we'll have to all work together to kind of educate on that and communicate what this change is, what it means. At the end of the day, it really doesn't mean anything, right? It's just a name change. It's a merger.
Right.
But people will ask the question, who is this? What is this? Where's ILAC? That kind of stuff. So
I need ILAC. I recognized under the ILAC MRA. What's this Globex? Are you not recognized?
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff is bound to happen in those questions. And I personally and a lot of other folks, are very, I guess, aware of that and trying to make sure everything is going to be communicated as much as possible, so that we try to get in front of a lot of that stuff during that transition.
And the transition period's a while. Right? How long is it? Is it a 3-year?
It's 3 years, really. So it should 2006. It'll kick off and the actual change. End of 2009, I believe, is when they want to run that through.
29,
so basically,
or
20. Sorry,
26 to 29.
Yeah.
For a second, I said, we're going back in time.
Let's go back in time. Let's get into the DeLorean.
Yeah. So. Hey, 29. I'd be a little bit younger, so maybe I should try to travel back there.
That's right. No, that's good to know, because it's going to be the customers of calibration that are the most confused. And sometimes the people that are listening to this are the ones most connected with those customers. So knowing that these things are coming out to communicate it is important.
So in 26, they'll start seeing, probably a little bit before, they might start hearing about it, but they'll start hearing about the ILAC and the IAF merger and the global.
Well, and it's going to be the customers that care, and those are going to usually be a lab's bigger customers, the ones that have some serious workload and stuff. So it's going to be people that are regulated, that are looking for specifically something that says ILAC, right? If they're aware of that acronym, they're going to want to know why it's changed.
Well, and all the documentation, right? How's that going to work, Rob? Now they're going to update documents as normally, and then they're still going to retain the ILAC P14, ILAC P10, all that stuff.
My understanding is that during this year, they are attempting to transition all of that into branding, right? So you won't have ILAC documents, you won't have IAF, you'll have one set, right, of documents.
So will they go over a full review, or do you think they're just going to rename it right now and then go?
No, I believe it's just the intent is to rename. I can't. Don't quote me on that.
No, that's fine. It's fine. It would just be a
documents in revision. Yeah.
You know how long it takes to revise one? So if all of a sudden they had to revise everything, that would be very difficult.
Right. No. This would be like a rebrand. Yeah. Then like a
rebrand.
Let's say. Yeah.
Hold on to your documents, your older ones, because they won't be available, and then you can have the original ILAC document.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Those would be worth. I'll even sign them for you if you're.
if you run into Rob at NCSLI Tech Exchange in January, and then the conference MSC. You'll be at MSC. You'll be at NCSLI. Being the former president of NCSLI, and changing the topic a little bit, how is that? How is that? I mean, I've been there. I've been there when you were with A2LA, just an excellent presenter, comical, making things fun. So same with NCSLI, and now you've been supportive. What are you actively doing in NCSLI now? Because you're assisting the former president is now done.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. And second of all, So I was president of NCSLI. So would have been, I got to remember now, 21 through 22, I believe. So really weird time, right? Post pandemic.
Yeah.
it was really challenging because a big part of what the organization does is a conference, right? And in 2020 there were no conferences, and the timing was it was bad. It was bad for the world, right? But especially trying to kind of navigate those types of things, it was a challenge. Fortunately, we had a good team to be able to navigate that. And then, not long after that, we had change in the organizational structure of how the organization was staffed. Going from a physical office with a like a direct employee staff to a virtual office with an association management company partner that's running the office now. And then CM Services, if you're with NCSLI, you've seen the emails and you've seen notices about that. And just working through that transition was a lot of work, a lot of stress, and I was either president or past president, and actually stepped in and was interim executive director during that time as well. So kind of working at least a job and a half during that time, and I really do need to thank, like. I need to thank Dana, because she was gracious in letting me dedicate a good amount of my time to supporting NCSLI stuff during that. But it was I think we came out on the other side a stronger organization and set up to really navigate the future and kind of the way that things are going with our organizations now. Conferences are coming back up. The last conference we had was a joint one with CPM this year. I had over 750 attendees, and it really, really went well. My role now is so I'm still on the board, but I'm an at-large board member. So I'm kind of acting
I like that name.
Yeah, he's just at large.
He's just at large.
Rob at large.
That's all that needs to be said.
But yeah, so I'm kind of acting as like in an operations role, where I'm just because I was so involved in like the day-to-day nuts and bolts of stuff, I'm still just there to assist with those type of things. And we're still going to see the board evolve a little bit over these next few years as we work with CM Services now, and things we used to do as board members they're doing. So that's really what we're focused on now, aside from the the normal stuff of just making sure members are happy. We've got good content. We've got good technical exchanges, and workshops and stuff. So that's kind of, I guess, the scoop on NCSLI.
Let's a couple of things there, if you don't mind. So if anybody's out there and has some good ideas for papers, good ideas for a tutorial or anything else, specifically, I would say abstracts. Right now, they can go submit to NCSLI. They might not have gotten the email. They may not know about it. NCSLI.org, if you want to go write, so just go through the process. It's write the banners right there. You can submit an abstract for a paper or something you want to present. If you've never presented, do not worry about it. You get over it. It's like 25 minutes. It's really getting people together to present these topics that are challenging and that's one of them. Now, the second part of it's the harder part of it is, how do we educate the masses? Because there's so much, there's such a spread on the content that's out there. Because you have people from NMIs are at high level, and they often write at high level. Like, I love Howard Kastrup's papers. Do I understand all of them? No. Is he good enough that I can get a grasp of what he's saying? Yes. Though not everybody has that ability to do that. And some of these, some scientists are so high level, and we've seen some conferences at NCSLI where they're just, blowing you like the NIST reference standards and doing this and that. And it's where you get lost in it. So how do we, as a community, there's people, we're all doing outreach. Ryan's running Sign, and those courses are beginner level, intermediate level, and go up. But how do we get away from, I would say, like, how do we get more into that, away from the NMI type stuff a little bit? Because it does serve its purpose for sure. I don't want to say it doesn't, but how do we get more at the beginner intermediate level to make sure people are grasping the concepts.
Sure.
Because that's a challenge, right? That is a big challenge.
Yeah. So part of the reason the technical exchange was developed, oh boy, how long ago was that? 15 years ago now, maybe a little bit more, was to do a lot of that, Henry, to get to like the bench level, to get people that level of training and engagement with metrology stuff, right? And quality system concepts. The conference, I would agree with you. There is a lot more of the NMI level stuff at the conferences with the papers, and we always struggle with trying to balance that a bit, right? Because you're trying to please the spectrum, right? So we're trying to have tracks where there's kind of NMI tracks, and there's some that are more of the practical application. And so I don't George Martin's probably, Henry. He's the technical, or has served as a technical chair for the past few years. And he's trying to balance those things out. Our tutorials, we're trying to do that as well. Metrology in motion webinars, we're trying to get to a bigger audience and get out there. But it's a challenge. I mean,
it's hard. Yeah,
it's really hard. But
labs are busy. Like that's
labs
the biggest
are busy,
hurdle.
and NMI people can submit and usually get the approval. Rob knows all about the approval process, right? Am I saying it right? You submit something to go to a conference, and you can get the approval if you submit, and they're more than willing a lot of times to say, yeah, I'll go teach this, or I'll go do this. So there's the pool of, I would say, the NMI people it might be a little bit easier for conferences to get, though the real need, and I don't want to discount the NMI people. Ted Dorian, there have been NMI people that have done the most fantastic simplifying things from beginner level, and there's also commercial labs that confuse the heck out of people, and no, this rule's not this, you need joint probability for this, you need all, and you're sitting there like, oh, I just came here to, I want to know how to tell somebody if it passes or fails, and I'm getting the pages of equations, and I don't understand any of it and how to implement anything right now.
Yeah.
So
at times, Henry, what's interesting is, so we recently started teaching a train the trainer, and I noticed that even in the trainers that I'm teaching that are lab level trainers, right, they try and it's almost like there's a pressure to make it as scientific as possible and all this stuff. And sometimes it's like, hey, let's keep it at the level that we're teaching and try and make this accessible, right? And I think sometimes that is the hard thing when you're coming into a conference. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think sometimes some of the presenters are newer and they're like, well, I don't even understand the audience's point of view, right? In order to convey it well. I did want to piggyback one opinion, Rob, and you don't have to comment on this, but I'm newer to the conference game, right? I came out of the Marine Corps. I've been very public in saying, like, I came out of the Marine Corps not knowing about NCSLI, MSC. We just didn't pass that information very well, and I think they're doing a lot better job at that now. So when I started going to the conferences was 2020, right there in the weird ones, right?
The canceled ones, MSC.
Yeah, but
the show must go on until.
But I love it, right? It's one of those things I see great value in it, especially getting people together, right? My opinion is this: I look at like the ITS one and this one last year. The joint conferences just make sense, because it brings so many different things together. Is that something that's being talked about? And again, you don't have to, if you'd rather just step away from that subject, but it's just something that was apparent to me because it boosts the numbers. It has somewhat, more focused nature, at least that ITS one. You had some really cool temperature stuff there. Just that was an observation I had.
Are you saying one conference to rule them all?
I'm saying, I mean, it makes it easier. Think of those lab managers, and it's like, who's my best guys? Who do I want to send to something? And then which one do I go? It in some ways we are muddying. And I will mention, just in my position, I've had the other metrology conferences reach out, like CMMs and those, whole different 500 600 person conferences that are sitting out there. It's like all of these combined would start to make 1,000 person, multiply the conference. It's, and I know there's so much logistics and things that I'm missing, but it's just an observation I had.
No, Ryan. So great observation, and definitely something the board has considered doing more of. So like CPEM, this was the first real joint conference we did with them. So it's supposed to happen in 2020. We've done other kind of like collaborative, like, okay, CPEM's going to have their thing here, like at the same time, but we didn't do like a truly joint one, right?
Sure.
And overall, it went quite well. And there is a lot more logistics, and there's a lot of things that went on behind the scenes that made it more complicated. But I think the payoff was there for the both organizations and their membership, right? Overall, I would say very positive feedback. Things also always you can improve on. That we and this.
It was great. It was fantastic for the first time out with the new management. It really was great.
So good, because that's a lot of work went into it. A lot of the NIST folks, especially in Boulder, put a ton of work into that. So like I do want to give them a shout out. Nice. In addition to all the normal effort that NIST puts into NCSLI, which is a lot, and it is very.
Wait, you mean they were doing something besides setting their clocks to be accurate for billions of years?
Believe it or not, yeah.
Wait a minute.
But we are trying to find more ways to collaborate with other similar organizations, right?
Nice.
The problem is when it makes sense, when how it can benefit both the organizations, how you can logistically pull it off gets complicated sometimes. Mm-hmm. But we are trying to find more ways to do that, because you are seeing consolidation of like laboratories, right? You're seeing conferences are not that most
laboratories they're buying everybody.
Yeah.
And the technical content used to be, if you got selected to present at NCSLI, it was a huge honor, right? They packed 4 days of technical presentations.
It's a different environment for sure. I think the days of like in the 90s or early 2000s even, where it seemed like industry just had a lot of money and they were willing to spend it on sending people to conferences and trade shows and to training and things. It's not like that anymore, right? Yeah. And there are a lot of these virtual things. So trying to adapt to that, and I think something that is fair to look at more as a board is where we can collaborate with those similar organizations to benefit both of the organizations, their members, their stakeholders. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and that's fair. I just know my own experience. It was so much fun at that ITS one. It was, and so it stuck out in my memory. But no, I totally understand.
And Cleveland's going to be great. We were there before. It's a phenomenal area. You got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I didn't get to visit, so I'm going to take an extra day this time through.
Nice.
And go.
Yeah, I'll have to go over there too.
Yeah, we can go and just I submitted my abstracts, so that's
fun. I did as well, and I will say, no more. We don't have any more Gaylord contracts right now. So, if you're worried about being trapped at a Gaylord or expensive resort
can we get
prices,
you to spill some beans on where the conference might be in 2026, or is that not?
So I'm trying to. I think the office, unless this is my memory, may be tricking me. I think they sent out an email blast of potential venues that they were looking at for future conferences to the membership. I thought.
I didn't see it, so maybe
yesterday.
Yes.
So
okay.
Yeah, so I think they're putting out some areas that we're looking into, and then I think they even asked for any feedback of any potential venues. So we're trying to do better at getting that information from folks to make sure that it's where people want to be, and that we can hit the membership. I think the thought process is still trying to move it around a little bit, so you can have some East Coast one year and West Coast one year, middle part of the country, because our membership is it is kind of located across the U.S. mostly and international, but mostly U.S. and Canada.
Sure. Yeah.
My biggest opinion on that is you put it by a bigger airport that people can get the higher percentage of people can get a direct flight, or at least get, if they're international, at least get a connecting flight that pulls them in without four stops or
Yeah, I think for our size of organization, I might use this term wrong because it's like a trade show marketing term or what. I think it's a tier two city is usually what works well for like our size of organization
Mhm.
because it
Sure.
usually has a good airport lift, but it's not as expensive as
Like
like your
Vegas is a tier one, right?
Vegas, yeah,
Yeah.
or LA or Washington D.C. The price point can get
Those are hard,
tricky.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Florida,
Okay.
you have Orlando. We went down to the Rose, and Orlando's like an
Mhm.
easy. There's
Yeah.
piggyback on that.
Yeah.
Dallas is easy.
And one
There's
of the
a
great
lot.
things of working with CM Services is they're an association management company that does what they do for NCSLI for like 24 other organizations,
A
right?
lot of experience.
So ton of experience, ton of leverage discounts. So they have like this
Oh,
huge network already to help us get the best deals we possibly can with the hotels and the convention centers and in evaluating these cities and things. So that's been just in the short time we have been working with them, something that I have really enjoyed having that like just that broad knowledge of putting on so many different conferences for so many different types of organizations. It's been
And they
nice.
know the
So
hotels and where to stay and all
yeah,
that. The best was
yeah,
the Portland one, the NCSL, I think 2018, when Andy Overshaw was your cohort in presenting some risk classes.
yeah, yeah,
Was talking about how long it was from the walk was from the conference center, and the smart people booked the non-conference hotel and were in a nicer hotel and closer to the center.
yeah.
That's the only one that I can say that was like, wow. If you knew the Portland area, anybody that knew the area booked a better hotel than what the conference had suggested. And we
Yeah.
some of us were a little salty about that because the nice hotel had the rooftop bar and all that stuff. So.
Well, I think the options this year are quite nice, as I recall. I think
Oh,
it's like
Cleveland's
yeah,
fantastic. The
I think
whole
it's the same too.
everything's there. The hotel, the conference center. You're not walking, half a mile away or anything like that. So, though
Yeah,
we did have fun in Portland. So let's talk about some fun stuff because Rob and I chased on a Tapped app, chased Pliny in Portland beer, and there's a group of different people that Rob has known across the way, and I think you travel absolutely everywhere and get to know people and presentations and some stuff. And for the listeners, Ryan, that Rob has an abundance of funny stories. So the one thing I have to ask him before we get into those is the video people. Misfits with Glenn Danzig or without?
Oh, oh, well, of course. I mean,
With, of
I
course,
named
you think their albums are better with Glenn
uh,
than without?
absolutely, yeah. So my not our current cat because he's passed away. He was 15 when he was 5 years ago or whatever. First cat my wife and I had together. His name was Glenn Danzig. So I might be a
that's
little
yeah. You're a
biased.
little biased. Well,
A little,
my
a little
wife and I
biased.
love Misfits and like that album. I forget the album name. So it was Saturday Night on it and all that. Those that Famous Monsters. I think it is maybe.
I think so. I don't know. What do I got behind me here? I got to remember. Yeah, Walk Among Us. I don't think it's on Walk Among Us.
No, no.
I
But
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I like Graves as well. But
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I still enjoy the newer stuff, and I like that they're still out there doing it. But
I know
and
that's crazy.
even Danzig, will occasionally they'll do like a reunion.
They
But it
have,
is
yeah,
funny. Yeah,
yeah. Famous Monsters is the one stat, and then you have. I had to look it up
yeah,
because Last Caress was it's
yeah,
just quick
yeah.
punk songs. I used to listen to Black. See, I like Black Flag with Henry Rollins. I thought they
Okay.
were
Yep.
better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
and band wise, Black Sabbath is the toughest one I think for question wise. It's like with Ozzy or without.
Mhm.
Because with Ozzy, you have Paranoid, which is one of the probably the quintessential metal albums. But without, you had like Dio had the voice and a Heaven and Hell
Yeah.
and all that stuff. So I don't know. Where are you on that one? Where are you guys on the
I'm an
listeners?
Aussie fan myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Black
Yeah.
Me
Sabbath with
too.
Ozzy is better than
Yeah.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Dio. And then
Maybe it's the
ACDC's
basic
Bon
answer.
Scott versus, yeah, we can just keep
Yeah,
going
that's
on
my
lead
son's
singers.
group. Yeah, he has a
Okay.
big opinion on
Yeah.
that.
Really? What's he with? Because
I don't know. I'll have to ask him.
Back in Black, Highway to Hell, all of the, and they kind of changed over from. Yeah, it's just.
I can't remember who it was. It was like some comedian, I think, was talking about AC/DC and switching, when they had to switch lead singers. And they're like, yeah, they're the only band that went from a lead singer with a horrible voice to an even worse voice.
Yeah, it's like a screaming. Yeah.
I like it. They're back on tour this year, and it's
a
like
screaming rasp.
Like, how old are they now? If anybody wants to see it, there's an old concert footage. Them, and I think they're in Australia. And Angus Young's playing guitar on the chairs, and the people there, they're not even headbanging. They're just sitting. Why? I mean, I guess in the time of the 70s, they just sat and watched the show, and then they applaud afterwards, and no one's like grooving to the music. It's the weirdest.
That's
one of the weirdest things. So, though, moving on from that to some of the
we're close. We're close to the end. We do have a pretty standard. Well, we can go a little bit past. I don't know how much time you have, Rob. But one of the questions I like to ask, especially from the things that you've seen, what's the weirdest calibration that you've ever witnessed? We've had examples of like Howard Zion from Transcat. What was it? A wambulator or a wobulator or some weird thing. Jeff Gus talked about using shells. I don't know. I'd have to go back and listen to what his was. I had to do SPRT calibrations around in a morgue.
Okay.
So do you have any weird calibrations that you've witnessed?
One that was kind of interesting, I guess probably maybe the strangest one or most interesting one I've actually witnessed was at a tobacco testing lab. And they have machines that do like puffs, I guess, per minute, or I don't remember exactly if it was burn rate or smoke rate, or if it was testing the filters, and it had to be so many, like, I guess, flow rate through the filter per minute or whatever it was. So NIST actually makes reference materials that's a carton of smokes and for like flammability and different things. So
people talk about standard peanut butter all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the NIST peanut butter pricing in the economy. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of testing that goes into that peanut butter, and I don't think you want to eat it. But
yeah. Are you saying it's not the best peanut butter? Your official
probably not. I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble. So no comment on the taste. I haven't tasted it. So that was pretty interesting. These machines that they had to basically set up to like smoke cigarettes, and how they would calibrate those machines to then run the tests that they were doing was pretty interesting. So that's probably the strangest one I could think of off.
I love it. Anyway. That's a really good one.
Was it camels? Which ones? What doctor?
Well, I probably shouldn't say.
No, don't say it. But what doctor recommended the cigarettes as the best healthy? It's all that. Like I prefer this cigarette.
You need to lose weight. Yeah, you see those old magazines. It's like you need to lose weight. Here, smoke cigarettes. Or
George C. Scott played a doctor. The actor. It's like in the ads. Like, I'm a doctor and I prefer this. So this reference peanut butter 2387 is now at $1,143 a jar, and you're telling me you do not have any in your house that you make sandwiches?
I don't. Believe it or not, I do not.
I can't.
Well, as measurement nerds, though, like I imagine if I worked in this right now, like if I got the job today and I was working there tomorrow, I would want to walk around so many places. You get to check things out and just kind of poke around and like, oh, cool, this is what's here. And I don't know. I would be so curious of the whole facility.
I haven't taken as much advantage of that as I should have. But yes, pretty much that's what's great about working here, right? I can email somebody at, like I know, at least I know someone at pretty much any of the labs, right? Or any of the groups. And I can just send an email and say, hey, I'd like to go take a look at this lab, look at how they make the peanut butter, or how they test that, or whatever, right?
The long tunnel for what is it, for rulers, not rulers, tape measures and stuff
Dimensional.
like that.
Right.
I
Ted
would love to
Dorian
see
had
that
that.
thing.
Oh
Yeah.
they have
Yeah.
what, the fiber optics downstairs. What else
Mhm.
is
The
some of the old acoustic chambers, right, that aren't even being
Yep.
used anymore. So
the advanced manufacturing center is really cool. They're doing a lot of cool manufacturing for like chips and things like that. That I got to tour that. Had to get all dressed up in this, like not a spacesuit, but you know what I mean, something like that to make sure I
Yeah.
wasn't contaminating anything. Why am
Yeah,
I blanking on
GMP
the suit?
stuff or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So and there's just so much cool stuff going on at NIST, and I need to do a better job of. But you know how it is. You're like you get focused at work.
Oh
You're just
yeah.
like.
You do
But
have a job.
you didn't volunteer to live in their solar, what is the house on campus?
The
solar
zero emissions house.
Zero emission house.
Oh
Or
yeah.
net zero.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So someone's living there or no?
People do. Yeah. So at different times, they actually will have people live there to simulate, what it actually is like if you were in this house for real, right? So they can get good test data.
Yeah, it's awesome. The stuff that NIST does. The other thing I wanted to plug with NIST is there's a documentary, and I don't know if we've ever talked about it on this podcast, but it's NIST documentary on AD-X2. It was a big deal. And then it was about a salesman that wanted to make a fortune with this chemical additive that would revolutionize the battery car business. And he said, you add this, you try to crank your car, start your car, and it doesn't start. You add this additive, and then magically it starts. And this got into Charles Eisenhart, one of the directors at NIST, eventually getting terminated because the guy took it to Congress. And then a lot of the people at NIST, the heads were like, this is BS. Eisenhart is a very moral person, and this other sham salesman is the problem. And it's just an excellent documentary. I think it's only like 20 some minutes, though it is a really, really cool thing. And Eisenhart, if people are out there reading the stuff on Eisenhart, we didn't get into the whole budget stuff, Rob, for you to talk about, but he was one of the master manipulators of the budget. Like, hey, there's money over here. I really need a statistician. Let me get it for this group, and then use it for this and this and that. Very well respected individual, as anybody that leads NIST is. You're like the best of the best when you're at that position. But this guy was a huge brain, and the story was really, really interesting about just about sham salespeople and how they were connected somewhere like to a senator or congressman or something, and it resulted in getting the NIST director terminated, which then they later fought and brought back and determined that this additive was a bunch of BS, and the statistical the methods, the data integrity was good, and what Eisenhart and his team did was solid science. So he believed a lot. He was one of the pioneering people for measurement uncertainty, and before measurement uncertainty, for making sure your test methods and your data collection was sound. The process was sound.
I wrote that down. I'm going to check that out too.
It's really, really cool. I don't know what else is NIST doing. They're always doing stuff, education, outreach, and everything else.
Well, do you mind, Rob? So, if you remember, a lot of our listeners are technicians, and they could be lead technicians, they could be managers, right? Can these people can reach out to NIST, right? NIST is there to help.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we're public servants, right? So, you can email anybody. You go to the website, you can look by division, you can find a name, you send an email, call them, and they're there to provide information and help. And if they're not the right person, they should be able to get you to somebody who is, right? And it is a federal campus. There is some security, but there's tours. If you're interested in taking tours and things like that. There is some other outreach events we do with webinars and things. We try to post them on the NIST website. There is a NIST LinkedIn page and things like that to just see what NIST is doing, right? And just literally, you should be able to call the director of NIST and talk to them. And so. We first of all, we're federal employees, we're public servants, we're here to serve, the U.S. public. So, and that's something we do take very seriously. I get kind of random calls here and there. Just once in a while, somebody says, oh, okay, calibration, accreditation, or Cal Labs, and then my name comes up, and I'll get random calls about hey, I'm just want to understand more about calibration, or we have an internal cal lab and I don't understand what these certificates mean, or
Oh yeah,
and NIST is on here, and that type of stuff,
sure,
right?
yeah.
And yeah, and I just take the time and try to educate them and explain to them, help them out. So yeah, no one should be afraid to talk to NIST folks. There are a lot of really smart people, and sometimes, yeah, maybe they talk at the NIST level and maybe aren't the best at bringing it down. But they're good people, really passionate about the science, about the measurements, and it's just a great place to work. I'm really fortunate that I've ended up here, being a kind of metrology nerd, I guess.
Hey, Rob, in my
Yeah.
opinion, if you ask them to bring it down, they will. My
Yes.
comment earlier is more about people not and then they not knowing the audience and talking at their level. So there's some work to be done there as far as let's
Yeah.
really dumb this down, and it makes it
More along
hard.
the lines of not knowing the audience of the conferences more than anything.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, we can get
like I
really
said,
nerdy about beer, Henry. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But it's like,
Well, there's
if people, but if people just
We're
want to talk
whiskey
Miller
now.
Lite, we could do, or
Yeah.
whiskey, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're passionate about something, you can sometimes forget, yeah, like you said, your audience, and maybe you need
Yeah,
to,
you start talking about it like, yeah, we got this DDH double dry hops, whatever. This
right,
spice,
yeah.
and then
These
people are like, what
hops
the
and this
heck? Well, you lost me
profile,
at
and
DDH. You lost me at
those
this or
hops
that.
have these terpenes, and yeah, you're
Yeah,
like, okay, whatever.
these hops, the newer hops, and where they're from, and everything else. So
Exactly.
the other things that are interesting, and we do have to wrap though, is Rob has birthed a cow. So how many people that work at NIST have birthed cows? I mean, do you have any idea?
What is a
I don't
birth
have
cow?
numbers. Yeah, I don't have numbers on that. Yeah, we
Yeah.
moved into the house here, and one day I was out weed whacking by one of our neighbors, had cattle, and I just heard somebody
Oh.
yelling my name. And then so yeah, I found myself somehow a few minutes later pulling a cow out of another cow. Never done that
Oh.
before.
Yeah.
And did not expect that when I woke up that morning. But hey, good news, cow lived a full life, so I guess I did okay.
So in all
I
the
guess
years in all the years I've known you, that is one of the things. You are willing to help almost anybody with anything. So
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you have your lines, but birthing the cow was not a line. So there's got to be one somewhere.
Hey, you got to try new experiences, and yeah. So there you go.
Awesome.
So.
Well, Rob, I truly appreciate you coming on the show. We have more topics down the road that I'd love to chat with you if we are able to work out you coming on again. But even without, thank you so much. I know a lot of new people to calibration are going to be wanting to know a lot of this information that we talked about today.
Oh, great. Well, yep. It's been a pleasure. Always happy to talk calibration, to talk accreditation, all that good stuff. So happy to come back again if I'm wanted and there are relevant topics that I know I could. I'm okay at talking. So as Henry will tell you.
We love that. So remind me. So you'll be at NCSLI. You'll be at NCSLI. Will you be at? You'll be at MSC as well.
Yeah, so I'll be at the
Great.
NCSLI Technical Exchange, which is end of January. So this might come out after that. I'm not sure. But then
probably.
MSC, I'll be there and doing. I think I've agreed to do a tutorial there. And NCSLI, I'll be there at the conference in Cleveland as well. Yeah.
Great. So if you see him there, say hi. And then I mean, last thing I'll mention, aren't correct me if I'm wrong, aren't you really into the karaoke as well? So catch you at the karaoke, right?
Yeah, he's got to learn a different song besides Miley Cyrus's "Wrecking Ball." So
it's one of my.
What's wrong with that?
Well, it's his go-to now. He's got to switch it up.
I have a whole list on my phone.
A little bit.
I'm always adding to it. So yeah,
he's got to do a metrology song. He's got to do a measurement song.
We need to write one, right? We got a lot of musicians that have been on the show. Well, thank you again, Rob, and thank you all for watching and listening.